He broke Bruno Sammartino's neck. He ran over the AWA World Championship with his pickup truck and mailed it back covered in mud. Stan Hansen did not play by anyone's rules, and for nearly 3 decades, he was the most dangerous man in professional wrestling. A nearly blind Texan with a wad of chewing tobacco in his lip and the most devastating lariat the business has ever seen, Hansen terrorized rings across the globe and became a bigger legend in Japan than he ever was in his own country. This is the story of the bad man from Borga, Texas, the last true outlaw of professional wrestling. John Stanley Hansen II was born on August 29, 1949, in Knox City, Texas. A small, rugged town in the western part of the state, Knox City was the kind of place where toughness was not a personality trait, but a survival skill. Hansen grew up in nearby Borga, Texas, a community built on oil money and rough living, where the men worked hard and fought harder. It was here that young Stan Hansen first learned that the world did not owe you anything, and that if you wanted something, you had better be willing to take it with both hands. From an early age, Hansen was a natural athlete. He was big, strong, and possessed an aggressive streak that made him a terror on the football field. By the time he reached high school, it was clear that Hansen had the physical tools to compete at the collegiate level, and he eventually earned a spot playing football at West Texas State University, now known as West Texas A&M University. This was no ordinary football program. West Texas State had a remarkable reputation for producing professional wrestlers. The list of grapplers who walked those hallways reads like a hall of fame in itself. Dory Funk Jr., Terry Funk, Tully Blanchard, Dusty Rhodes, Bruiser Brody, and many more all had connections to the university. It was a breeding ground for the toughest men in the business, and Hansen fit right in. Playing as a lineman for the Buffaloes from 1968 to 1970, Hansen was known for his imposing size, his raw physicality, and his refusal to back down from anyone. At around 6'3" and 250 pounds during his college years, he was a force on the defensive line. But football was not going to be his ultimate destination. After graduating, Hansen set his sights on professional football and tried out for the Detroit Wheels of the upstart World Football League in 1974. The league was a short-lived attempt to rival the National Football League, and unfortunately for Hansen, his time with the Wheels was even shorter. He was released before the season began, a victim of roster cuts and the general instability that plagued the league. When the league folded entirely not long after, Hansen found himself at a crossroads. It was at West Texas State that Hansen had first crossed paths with Dory Funk Jr., one of the greatest technical wrestlers of all time, and a man whose family essentially ran the Amarillo wrestling territory. With football no longer a viable career path, Hansen turned to Funk for guidance. Dory took Hansen under his wing and began training him in the art of professional wrestling, emphasizing the physical conditioning and fundamental techniques that would serve as the foundation for everything Hansen would accomplish in the ring. The training was brutal, as you would expect from anyone connected to the Funk family, but Hansen thrived on it. He had spent his entire life being tough, and now he had found a profession that would pay him for it. Stan Hansen made his professional wrestling debut in 1973. He initially worked part-time while still holding out hope for a football career. He cut his teeth in the Amarillo territory and in various NWA-affiliated promotions, working small shows for little money and learning the business from the ground up. In 1975, while competing in Leroy McGuirk's tri-state territory, Hansen first teamed with a man who would become his lifelong friend and one of the most legendary tag team partners in wrestling history, Frank Goodish, better known to the wrestling world as Bruiser Brody. The two men had known each other from their days at West Texas State, and their chemistry both inside and outside the ring was immediate and undeniable. Together, they formed one of the most violent and unpredictable tag teams the sport had ever seen, and their partnership would endure for years to come. By 1976, Hansen had gained enough experience and enough of a reputation to catch the attention of the biggest promotion in the northeastern United States, the Worldwide Wrestling Federation, run by Vince McMahon Sr. The company was headlined by the legendary Italian strongman Bruno Sammartino, who had held the World Championship for years and was arguably the biggest draw in professional wrestling. Hansen arrived in the Worldwide Wrestling Federation and within just 2 months of his debut found himself thrust into the main event scene, feuding with Sammartino for the heavyweight championship. On April 26, 1976, at Madison Square Garden in New York City, Stan Hansen and Bruno Sammartino collided in a match for the Worldwide Wrestling Federation Championship. During the bout, Hansen attempted a body slam on Sammartino, but the move went wrong. The landing was awkward, and Sammartino suffered a legitimate broken neck. The injury was serious and required significant recovery time, sidelining the champion and sending shockwaves through the wrestling world. Rather than bury the incident, the Worldwide Wrestling Federation and Sammartino himself decided to turn it into a storyline. The narrative became that Hansen's devastating Lariat, his signature running clothesline, had broken the champion's neck. This story elevated Hansen from a mid-card brawler to a genuine monster heel overnight. Suddenly, Stan Hansen was the most dangerous man in professional wrestling, the man who had broken the neck of the seemingly invincible Bruno Sammartino. When Sammartino recovered, the two met again on June 25, 1976, at Shea Stadium in front of a massive crowd. Sammartino won the rematch, gaining his revenge, but the feud had already accomplished its purpose. Hansen was now a made man. His name carried weight, his lariat was feared. The rematch at Shea Stadium drew an enormous crowd, and the atmosphere was electric. Sammartino came back with a vengeance, fueled by the desire to prove that he could overcome the man who had nearly ended his career. The Garden faithful were firmly behind their hero, and when Sammartino emerged victorious, the roar of the crowd could be heard for blocks. But the night belonged to both men. Sammartino had his revenge, and Hansen had established himself as a legitimate main event attraction in the most important wrestling market in the world. The incident with Sammartino would follow him for the rest of his career and become one of the defining moments of 1970s professional wrestling. Hansen left the Worldwide Wrestling Federation shortly after, but he would return in 1980, reigniting his feud with Sammartino and also entering heated rivalries with the then World Wrestling Federation champion Bob Backlund, Pedro Morales, and the legendary Andre the Giant. His feud with Backlund culminated in a steel cage match at Madison Square Garden. It further cemented Hansen's reputation as one of the most intense and physical performers in the business. But it was across the Pacific Ocean that Stan Hansen would truly become a legend. Hansen had actually first visited Japan in September 1975, making a brief tour for All Japan Pro Wrestling. But it was his arrival in New Japan Pro Wrestling in January 1977 that truly launched his Japanese career. Through the booking connections of Vince McMahon Sr., Hansen made his debut for New Japan, carrying the reputation of the man who had broken Bruno Sammartino's neck, and the Japanese audiences ate it up immediately. Hansen quickly established himself as a top heel, facing New Japan's biggest stars, including the legendary Antonio Inoki, Seiji Sakaguchi, and Tatsumi Fujinami. He also squared off against top American talent who toured Japan, including Andre the Giant, Dusty Rhodes, Bob Backlund, and Hulk Hogan. Hansen's dominance in New Japan was highlighted by his performances in the promotion's prestigious MSG tournament from 1978 to 1981. He was a force of nature in every tournament he entered, and on February 8, 1980, Hansen accomplished something that very few men in history could claim. He defeated Antonio Inoki for the NWF World Championship, becoming only the second man to dethrone Inoki during his legendary 7-year reign with the title. In a country where Inoki was worshipped as a national hero, pinning him clean was the equivalent of slaying a god. Hansen's status in Japan skyrocketed overnight. During the first MSG Tag League tournament in late 1980, Hansen even teamed with a young Hulk Hogan. Though the partnership did not produce a tournament victory, Hansen continued to make appearances for New Japan through 1981. But a seismic shift was about to change the landscape of his career forever. In 1981, Stan Hansen defected from New Japan Pro Wrestling to their bitter rival All Japan Pro Wrestling, run by the legendary Giant Baba. The move was a massive deal in the world of Japanese wrestling, where loyalty between promotions was taken very seriously. Hansen saw an opportunity in All Japan that New Japan could not match, and his decision to jump ship would prove to be one of the smartest moves of his career. At All Japan, Hansen became arguably the most important foreign wrestler in the promotion's history. He made history by becoming the only man to pin both Antonio Inoki and Giant Baba in championship singles matches, a distinction that placed him in truly rarefied air. From 1982 to 1999, Hansen was a fixture in All Japan's annual World's Strongest Tag Determination League, the promotion's prestigious year-end tag team tournament. He formed legendary teams with some of the greatest wrestlers to ever step into a ring. His partnership with Bruiser Brody was a terrifying spectacle, two of the wildest men in wrestling history unleashing chaos on their opponents, and often on the audience as well. Fans in Japan would flee from their seats when Hansen and Brody charged through the crowd, swinging chairs and bull ropes with reckless abandon. Beyond Brody, Hansen formed championship-caliber teams with Terry Gordy, the $1 Million Man, Genichiro Tenryu, Dan Spivey, Bobby Duncombe Jr., Gary Albright, and Big Van Vader. The loss of Bruiser Brody in 1988, stabbed to death in Puerto Rico, was a devastating blow to Hansen, both personally and professionally. Brody had been more than a tag team partner. He had been a brother, a fellow West Texas State alumnus, and one of the few men in the business who matched Hansen's intensity and fearlessness. Hansen carried the loss of his friend with him for the rest of his career, and those who knew him said he was never quite the same after Brody's death. His tag team record in All Japan is staggering. He won the AJPW World Tag Team Championship 8 times with 5 different partners, and he won the PWF World Tag Team Championship 4 times with 3 different partners. In a promotion that prided itself on its tag team division, Hansen was the cornerstone around which everything was built. One of the most memorable moments from Hansen's time in All Japan came from his legendary brawl with Andre the Giant. The two behemoths collided in a match that quickly devolved into absolute chaos. Tables were smashed, chairs were thrown, and the two massive men battled through the crowd with no regard for their own safety or the safety of anyone around them. It was one of the most talked about matches in All Japan history, and it further cemented Hansen's status as a man who feared nobody, not even the most physically imposing human being on the planet. Hansen's in-ring style was perfectly suited for the Japanese audience. He was stiff, he was brutal, and he was unapologetically violent. Japanese fans respected wrestlers who hit hard and fought with genuine intensity. And nobody hit harder than Stan Hansen. His famous Lariat, celebrated by commentators who screamed Lariato every time it connected, became one of the most feared finishing moves in all of professional wrestling. Hansen attributed his notoriously stiff style to his extremely poor eyesight. He was nearly blind without his glasses, and because he could not wear corrective lenses in the ring, he often could not see his opponents clearly. That meant his strikes were sometimes imprecise and almost always delivered with full force, because he could not gauge the distance well enough to pull his punches. What might have been a liability in another context became Hansen's greatest asset. His opponents never knew exactly when or where the next devastating blow was coming, and that unpredictability made him genuinely terrifying to wrestle. His gimmick was pure Texas, a loud, violent cowboy who wanted to fight everybody and everything. Hansen would appear at events wearing a cowboy hat, leather vest, and carrying his trademark bull rope with a cowbell attached, Tobacco juice dripped from his chin as he snarled and stomped his way to the ring. In Japan, he earned the nickname Fuchin-kan, which translates to unsinkable battleship, a testament to his durability and his refusal to stay down no matter how much punishment he absorbed. While Hansen was dominating All Japan, he also made a significant impact in the American Wrestling Association during 1985 and 1986. On December 29, 1985, Hansen defeated Rick Martel to capture the American Wrestling Association World Heavyweight Championship. It was a crowning achievement in the United States, adding a prestigious world title to his growing collection of accolades. However, what happened next became one of the most infamous stories in wrestling history. The American Wrestling Association wanted Hansen to drop the championship to Nick Bockwinkel, a veteran wrestler and former champion. Hansen was scheduled to defend the title against Bockwinkel on June 29, 1986. But the situation was complicated by the fact that Giant Baba had already booked title challenges for Hansen in Japan. According to the most widely circulated version of events, Hansen called Baba to ask if losing the American Wrestling Association title would be acceptable, and Baba said no. He had plans for that championship in All Japan, and he expected Hansen to keep it. Caught between the demands of two promoters on two different continents, Hansen chose to side with Baba and did not show up for the title defense against Bockwinkel. The American Wrestling Association was furious. They stripped Hansen of the championship and awarded it to Bockwinkel, using one of the tag team championship belts as a stand-in since Hansen still had the actual title belt in his possession. When the American Wrestling Association demanded that Hansen return the physical belt, he complied, but not before running it over with his pickup truck. The belt arrived at American Wrestling Association headquarters, mangled, bent, and covered in tire tracks and mud. It was the most Stan Hansen thing imaginable, a final act of defiance from a man who refused to bow to anyone. Hansen would later express some regret over how he handled the situation, acknowledging that he could have been more diplomatic. But at the time, it was a statement that resonated with everything his character represented. He answered to nobody. In 1990, one of the most infamous incidents in professional wrestling history occurred when Stan Hansen returned to New Japan for a special inter-promotional match against Big Van Vader at the Super Fight at Tokyo Dome. The match was for the IWGP Heavyweight Championship, with Vader representing New Japan and Hansen representing All Japan. Before the match began, Hansen accidentally struck Vader in the nose with his bullrope during his entrance, breaking it. Both men were known for an incredibly stiff style, and what followed was a brutal exchange of legitimate punches and forearms. During the brawl, Hansen's thumb inadvertently connected with Vader's left eye, causing it to pop out of its socket. In a moment replayed and discussed countless times in wrestling history, Vader removed his mask, pushed his eyeball back into its socket with his own hand, and held it in place with his eyelid. The match continued and was eventually ruled a no contest. Vader later required a metal plate to be surgically inserted under his eye as a result of the injury. Despite the horrific nature of the incident, both men maintained respect for each other, and Vader would go on to induct Hansen into the WWE Hall of Fame decades later. It was a testament to the mutual admiration between two of the hardest-hitting men in wrestling history. Also in 1990, Hansen won his first Triple Crown Heavyweight Championship by defeating Terry Gordy on June 8, 1990. The Triple Crown was All Japan's top singles championship, and winning it validated Hansen as not just a tag team specialist, but a dominant singles competitor. He would go on to hold the Triple Crown 4 times over the course of his career, engaging in some of the most memorable title matches in All Japan history. Hansen also had a brief but notable run in World Championship Wrestling in late 1990 and early 1991. He feuded with Lex Luger over the NWA United States Heavyweight Championship, defeating Luger at Halloween Havoc on October 27, 1990, to capture the title and end Luger's record-setting reign of 523 days. Luger regained the belt from Hansen in a Texas Lariat match at Starrcade on December 16, 1990. Hansen continued to make appearances in WCW while simultaneously touring with All Japan, but he ultimately left WCW in 1991 after a disagreement with the company over their creative plans. The company wanted to involve Hansen in a comedy-oriented storyline featuring a group called the Desperados, a trio of bumbling cowboys searching for Hansen through a series of vignettes. Hansen, whose entire career was built on being one of the most legitimately terrifying men in wrestling, wanted absolutely nothing to do with it. He returned to All Japan full-time and never looked back. The 1990s in All Japan belonged in large part to the epic rivalry between Stan Hansen and Mitsuharu Misawa. Misawa was one of the legendary Four Pillars of Heaven alongside Toshiaki Kawada, Kenta Kobashi, and Akira Taue, and he represented the next generation of Japanese wrestling. The rivalry between Hansen and Misawa was one of generational conflict, the aging veteran fighting to maintain his position against the hungry young challenger. Their matches were wars of attrition, with Misawa trying to neutralize Hansen's deadly lariat through targeted arm work, while Hansen relied on his power, his experience, and his sheer brutality to overwhelm the younger man. Hansen dominated the early portion of the rivalry, defeating Misawa repeatedly in both tournament matches and title bouts. He beat Misawa for the vacant Triple Crown in 1990. He beat him in the Champions Carnival in 1991. He retained the Triple Crown against him in March 1992 and beat him again in the 1992 Champions Carnival final. It seemed like Misawa could not figure out the code to beating Hansen, no matter how he approached the matchup. But on August 22, 1992, at the Nippon Budokan in Tokyo, Misawa finally broke through. After absorbing punishment that would have finished lesser men, Misawa connected with his signature elbow strike and pinned Hansen to win the Triple Crown Heavyweight Championship for the first time. The crowd erupted. It was a passing of the torch, a moment that signaled a new era in All Japan Pro Wrestling. Hansen had been the mountain that Misawa needed to climb, and by finally conquering that mountain, Misawa established himself as the undisputed ace of the promotion. The two men would continue to trade the championship back and forth over the next several years, clashing in a total of 14 singles matches between 1990 and 1998. Their rivalry is remembered as one of the greatest in All Japan history, a perfect blend of old-school brutality and new generation athleticism that produced some of the most dramatic matches of the decade. Hansen held the Triple Crown 4 times in total, with his final reign ending in May 1995 when Misawa defeated him in Sapporo. Throughout this period, Hansen also continued to be a dominant force in All Japan's tag team division. He teamed with Genichiro Tenryu, Terry Gordy, and later Gary Albright, competing in the world's strongest tag determination league year after year and putting on the kind of hard-hitting performances that had made him a legend. The late 1990s brought significant changes to All Japan Pro Wrestling. Giant Baba, the owner and patriarch of the promotion, passed away in January 1999. Baba had been Hansen's primary advocate and the man most responsible for bringing him to All Japan in the first place. With Baba gone, Misawa took over as the promotion's booker and began shifting the focus away from foreign talent toward developing younger Japanese wrestlers like Takao Omori and Yoshihiro Takayama. Hansen found his role diminishing, but he remained professional and continued to work where he was needed. In 2000, Misawa and the vast majority of All Japan's roster made the shocking decision to leave the promotion and form a new company called Pro Wrestling Noah. It was one of the biggest mass exodus events in wrestling history. It left All Japan on the brink of collapse. Despite the fact that his role had been reduced, and despite the fact that nearly everyone he had worked with was leaving, Hansen chose to stay loyal to All Japan. He had been with the company for nearly 2 decades, and he was not about to abandon it in its darkest hour. Unfortunately, Hansen's body was no longer cooperating. Years of brutal matches had taken their toll, and his lower back problems, specifically lumbago, had become increasingly severe. On October 21, 2000, Hansen wrestled his final singles match as part of a tournament for the vacant Triple Crown Heavyweight Championship. He lost in the semi-finals to his old partner Genichiro Tenryu, who went on to win the tournament. Hansen's last match was a six-man tag team bout on October 28, 2000, in which he teamed with Steve Williams and Wolf Hawkfield in a losing effort. On January 28, 2001, Stan Hansen officially announced his retirement from professional wrestling. The man who had traveled the world swinging a bull rope and laying out anyone who crossed his path had finally hung up his cowboy hat for good. After retiring, Hansen underwent significant surgeries to repair the damage that decades of wrestling had inflicted on his body. He had surgery on his back and had both knees replaced. The recovery was long but successful, and Hansen was able to enjoy a comfortable retirement. He took on the role of commissioner of All Japan's Pacific Wrestling Federation, the governing body for the promotion's top championships. In this role, he would appear at Triple Crown and World Tag Team Championship matches to make official proclamations and lend his legendary presence to the proceedings. He held this position until July 2007, when he voluntarily resigned. Outside of wrestling, Hansen proved to be far more than the wild-eyed cowboy that fans saw on television. He was a devoted family man who raised 4 children. From his first marriage, he had a son, John Stanley Hansen III, and a daughter, Elizabeth. He later married his wife, Yumi, with whom he had 2 more sons, Shaver and Samuel. Both Shaver and Samuel inherited their father's athletic genes and pursued careers in baseball. Shaver played at Baylor University before being drafted by the Seattle Mariners in the 6th round of the 2009 MLB draft. Samuel played college baseball at the University of Texas at Arlington. Although Hansen often joked during his wrestling career that he had 9 kids, the real number was 4, and by all accounts, he was a far more gentle and thoughtful father than his in-ring persona would suggest. In 2011, Hansen released his autobiography, co-written and titled The Last Outlaw, chronicling his remarkable journey from the oil fields of Borga, Texas, to the sold-out arenas of Tokyo, Japan. The book provided fans with an intimate look at the man behind the cowboy hat, revealing the intelligence, the humor, and the business savvy that allowed Hansen to build one of the most successful careers in international wrestling history. Last Outlaw. The accolades and recognition Hansen received in his later years were a testament to his impact on the wrestling world. He was inducted into the Wrestling Observer Newsletter Hall of Fame in 1996. He was inducted into the Professional Wrestling Hall of Fame in 2010. He was named to New Japan Pro Wrestling's Greatest 18 Club and the Tokyo Sports Hall of Fame. And on April 2, 2016, Stan Hansen was inducted into the WWE Hall of Fame as part of the class of 2016, inducted by Big Van Vader. It was a fitting tribute. The man who had disfigured Vader's eye and who had fought him in one of the most brutal matches in wrestling history was the one who stood at the podium and told the world what Hansen meant to the business. Hall of Fame. Pro Wrestling Illustrated ranked Hansen number 16 out of the top 500 singles wrestlers of the PWI years in 2003, and his tag team with Bruiser Brody was ranked 7th among the top 100 tag teams ever. These rankings only begin to scratch the surface of what Hansen accomplished. Rankings. In Japan, he held 7 different championships in All Japan Pro Wrestling alone. He was a multiple-time world champion across his career, with the exact count varying depending on which titles are recognized, though he is universally acknowledged as a 4-time Triple Crown heavyweight champion. He headlined events at the Tokyo Dome, Madison Square Garden, Shea Stadium, Budokan Hall, and arenas across the globe. He was the most successful foreign wrestler in Japanese history, a distinction that carries enormous weight in a country that has produced some of the greatest professional wrestlers who ever lived. In Japan, Hansen was not just respected, he was beloved. 4-time, he appeared in commercials, he was featured in magazines, and his image was used to sell everything from energy drinks to action figures. The Japanese fans admired his intensity, his dedication, and the respect he showed for their culture and their style of wrestling. Hansen learned enough Japanese to conduct interviews in the language, and he embraced the traditions and customs of the country that had given him a second home. For many Japanese wrestling fans, Hansen was not a foreigner at all. He was one of them. Dedication. What made Stan Hansen special was not just his toughness, though that was certainly part of it. It was not just his lariat, though that finishing move is rightfully considered one of the greatest in history. What made Hansen special was his authenticity. In a business built on artifice and performance, Hansen always felt real. When he swung that bull rope, it looked like he was trying to take someone's head off, because he probably was. When he threw a lariat, it was not a cooperative maneuver between two performers, it was a runaway truck colliding with a human body. His poor eyesight, which might have ended another man's career, became the thing that made him unique. He could not see well enough to work safe, so he worked stiff, and in doing so he created a style of wrestling that influenced generations of performers who came after him. Authenticity. JBL, who went on to become one of the biggest heel champions in WWE history, modeled his entire in-ring style after Hansen, right down to the lariat and the Texas cowboy persona. The clothesline from hell that JBL used as his finishing move was a direct descendant of Hansen's Western lariat, and JBL was not shy about acknowledging the debt he owed to his idol. Clothesline from hell. Countless other wrestlers have cited Hansen as an influence. From Japanese stars who grew up watching him terrorize arenas to American wrestlers who studied his matches on grainy VHS tapes, traded between fans in the days before the internet made everything accessible. Stan Hansen was a paradox. He was a man who could barely see, but who saw the wrestling business more clearly than almost anyone. He was a wild-eyed maniac in the ring, and a thoughtful, intelligent family man outside of it. He was an American who became more famous in Japan than he ever was in his home country. He was a football player who failed to make a professional roster, and then went on to become one of the most successful professional athletes of his generation in an entirely different sport. His career numbers are staggering. Multiple world championships across multiple continents. Tag team titles that span nearly 2 decades of dominance, rivalries that helped define entire eras of professional wrestling in both America and Japan, matches that are still studied and discussed by fans and historians more than 2 decades after his retirement. And through it all, a commitment to his craft and his character that never wavered, not once in almost 30 years of competition. The bad man from Borgia, Texas, did not just have a career, he had a legacy. And that legacy endures to this day, in every wrestler who throws a lariat, in every foreign talent who dreams of making it big in Japan, and in every fan who understands that sometimes the most real thing in professional wrestling is a nearly blind Texan with a bull rope, a wad of tobacco, and absolutely nothing to lose. Stan Hansen, the lariat, the unsinkable battleship, the last outlaw, one of the greatest professional wrestlers who ever lived. And if you were unlucky enough to be standing across the ring from him when that right arm started swinging, you understood exactly why. Drop a comment below and let us know which Stan Hansen match you think was his greatest. Was it the war with Vader, the rivalry with Misawa, or the night he broke Bruno Sammartino's neck and changed the course of wrestling history forever? We want to hear from you. Until next time.